Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today I thought we would do another mixed haul. I got a bunch of stuff here that I need to get off my desk. This one might take a little bit longer than usual, but it will culminate in an unbox and reveal of this little beauty from Arrow Video, and that is Hellraiser Quartet of Torment. All right, so we'll finish with that one. But we got some books, we got some CDs, we got a bunch of movies as well. So we got a bunch of stuff that we'll go through, and it should be fun. All right. So I usually start with the books to get them out of the way first, because it seems when most people watch my videos, they're more interested in the other things rather than the books. It should be quick anyways, because most of these books I've spoken about before. So we have two versions of To Kill a Mockingbird. You get the paperback, all right, and then you got the nice soft cover, all right. So this is the 50th anniversary. It's nice. I like the soft covers because they're easier to read. Paperback, if you're going to be on the bus, is probably the best thing that you can probably take, right? Because it's easier to carry in your bag or wherever. But some people prefer this because it's a bit bigger, easier to handle, and the wording inside is a bit bigger than in a paperback, so it's easier to read, right? So some people prefer these ones, but most people don't prefer hardcovers. Hardcovers are the most difficult to read, unless you're sitting on your lazy boy and you're going to read on a chair. You're not going to be moving around or carrying it around. Then sometimes people read a hardcover, but I find hardcovers are more keepsakes. You put them on the shelf somewhere, kind of thing. And these paper versions are more popular, right? So as for reselling, this book is really easy to resell. It's one of the most popular and great American fiction novels. Like I said, I spoke many times about this novel itself, so I'm not going to go into reviewing it or whatever, telling you the story or so on, right? So let's just say, if you haven't read To Kill a Mockingbird and you're interested in it takes place in the South. It's about a lawyer who defends an African American against a rape charge, and it gets into all that, racism and segregation, everything else that happened in the South during, I think this takes place in the 1940s, but don't quote me on that. All right, so could be in the 60s, actually, maybe in the 60s. All right, so you got those two books. If you haven't read To Kill a Mockingbird, highly recommended, one of the greatest novels of all time. Next up is The Secret Garden, one of the great children's books of all time, about a girl, an orphan, I think, or ends up moving in with an uncle who's like very distant, and she finds a secret garden, an actual cousin that she didn't know she had, and this garden, anyways, it's the reason why I picked it up is this doesn't resell really quickly, but the Paper Mill Press, I don't know if you've know of this press or not, but they have some kind of flexible hardcovers that are kind of cloth bound, and these ones here, the children's section, these are more soft cover, but they're very nice editions. They're not too expensive either. This one is $12.99 in Canada. So when I find Paper Mill Press, I always pick it up because people find these editions nice. So we got Death of a Salesman. This is Arthur Miller's probably greatest play, although he's had a few. Basically about Willie Loman, who's a salesman. Anyways, it's one of the most depressing plays I've ever read. It's all about the loss of your dreams, basically. If you want to read a depressing play, read this one. It's basically about loss of dreams. Now we got okay, so this is the latest and last version of the new Canadian Library, which started out in the 1950s, just after World War II, if I remember correctly, 1950s. Those ones were like paperback size, and they're all numbered, right? And they kept publishing. It was basically the brainchild of what was his name? It's been a while since I've talked about this. Anyways, McClelland and Stewart got together, the Canadian publisher, which isn't Canadian anymore, but that's another story. But back in the day, they're the main source of Canadian literature and Canadian publishing was McClelland and Stewart, right? So, and they decided to put out a series of paperbacks of Canadian novels, and some poetry, some criticism stuff, tailored towards the Canadian student, because we're so used to it in Canada, but being overrun by American, French, or British culture, that it's kind of hard sometimes to find Canadian culture because of it, right? So McClelland and Stewart started publishing Canadian novels, historically important Canadian novels, for the student, because what was happening was professors wanted to do a course in Canadian literature, and they couldn't, because they couldn't get books to their students. They would have to find like a hardcover edition of when the book was published, and then, I don't know, do photocopying of it and stuff, you know what I mean? Or, you're in Canada and you can't even find your own literature, right? So McClelland and Stewart went on a publishing campaign to publish Canadian. Now, none of them ended up being hardcover or anything. They're all paperbacks, and they went through 4 or 5 versions. This was the last version. They actually made trade paper size novels. Over time, these ones came out in the 2000s. So, but that was the last of it. Now the only way you're getting any of these novels now, you're getting them through Penguin. Well, the publisher Penguin, it's owned by a Danish company or something. I can't remember. Anyways, but if you see New Canadian Library, all right, in any of its forms, all right, it's Canadian fiction, historical fiction not historical fiction, but fiction in the history of Canada, like over its history, right? Because Canada didn't really get its own voice in literature internationally until like the 1960s, really. But this goes all the way back to like the 1800s, all the books that were published in Canada, from even pre-Confederation, right? So now the Tin Flute, or Bonheur d'occasion, I think it's in French. I apologize for my brutalization of the French language, but basically one of Canada's greatest novels, all right, written by Gabrielle Roy, about a really poor French Canadian family living in one of the boroughs of Montreal, Saint Maurice. Where was it? Saint Henri, in Saint Henri, the neighborhood of Saint Henri. Not big enough to be a borough, really. And their struggles back in the day, during the Depression and that. So it's not a really happy novel, but a lot of Canadian fiction, early Canadian fiction, isn't very isn't very positive, because it was a struggle to live in Canada in the early days of Canada, right? So, all right, so that's the Tin Flute. It's top 5 of all the Canadian novels, if you decide to read Canadian literature. All right, then we got one of the great British novels, which is Wuthering Heights. Emily Bronte. It was Emily Bronte, right? Yeah. This is her only novel, about Heathcliff and all that. I spoke about it before. I'm not going to get into it. And then we have Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. This novel, I always got around to wanting to read, but I never ended up reading it. With its blend of Eastern mysticism and Western culture, Hesse's best known, most autobiographical work is one of literature's most poetic evocations of the soul's journey to liberation. How's that for a tagline? All right. Then Under the Volcano by Malcolm Lowry. Its Fiesta Day of the Dead, the Mexican Jeffrey Firmus, ex-counsel, ex-husband, an alcoholic and ruined man, is living out his last day of his life. Very depressing novel. As well as this one, novelette, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, and Confessions, which is the second thing. So Tolstoy is really easy to resell. I haven't read that one though. This one is the one that I was the most interested in finding and getting. This one is Michael Herr's Dispatches. Basically, what do they call it? New journalism? I think it's called the new journalism, or the new, I don't know, there was this like trend somewhat where reporters would stop reporting like they're reporting and start reporting like they're novelists. You know what I mean? Like Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil would be another example. Maybe what was that Truman Capote book about the murders? In Cold Blood, that one as well. And this one. So In Cold Blood is about a murder, and so is In the Garden of Good and Evil by Jeremy Brent. I can't remember. Anyway, so there was like a change where they're putting fiction and nonfiction kind of together, or they're writing nonfiction like it is fiction, right? So where the storyline seems more important than just giving over the facts to you, right? So In Cold Blood was one of the first ones that you saw doing that with Truman Capote, where he did all this research on this murder that happened wherever it happened. Well, actually, it was a family that was murdered, wasn't it? Anyway, so but he kind of wrote it like a novel rather than like, you know, a reporter or a journalist would write it, right? And In the Garden of Good and Evil, that one as well. That one was written that way. Well, this one is kind of like that. It has to do with the Vietnam War. It has to do with Michael Herr, who is a journalist. It's called New Journalism, where he mixes fact with fiction when he's writing stories about the Vietnam War. So he experienced a lot of it himself, and then he translates that into stories that didn't necessarily happen in the way that he wrote them. He embellishes or whatever, you know what I mean? He said in an interview or whatever that it wasn't meant to be taken as fact, right? It was more fiction, but it put across a good idea of what soldiers and others experienced during the Vietnam War, and so it became a popular book to read, right? And the Everyman Library added it to its collection, its new collection. It's number 318 in the library, so I can add that to my collection because I didn't have it before. So I think that's all the books, all right? So let's do some CDs. How about we'll do some CDs? Okay, so I found this one. Some argue this is the greatest Canadian album of all time by the greatest Canadian band of all time. I mean, there's no real big argument against it. It is one of the greatest albums. This is the one with American Woman and No Time, No Sugar Tonight. It's just full of hits that you've heard on the radio over the decades, right? And the Guess Who, probably you could take like 3 juggle balls and juggle them, and when you stopped on one of the balls, that could be like the greatest Canadian band. The Three Balls would be like the Guess Who, the Tragically Hip, and Rush. And you just toss them up and you stop. Say, so the greatest band is this one, and you wouldn't be wrong, really. Like, personally speaking, I would say the Tragically Hip are the greatest Canadian band of all time, but the Guess Who or Rush, you tell me, they're all great bands, right? And this is, their greatest album. All right. Here's another great Canadian band, Metric. All right, they're out of Toronto. Emily Haines has an extremely good voice, and this is kind of electro pop, right? I don't know if you've heard these guys, because I think this is their fourth album, but I think this is the first one that got a lot of attention down south. Maybe I'm not sure. I'd have to look back, but this is their fourth album. They're just such a fun band to listen to. It's these guys and the Beaches are the two bands out of Toronto over in the last 20 years that have been, you have Broken Social Scene, and you had that whole scene actually in Toronto. They were part of it. These guys were part of it as well. But these guys, especially if you like female-led vocals, these guys in the Beaches, extremely good stuff coming out of Toronto. And if you like electropop, all right. Another Canadian, Corb Lund, Losing Lately Gambler. So Corb Lund is like Albertan. He's from Alberta, country western singer. This is really good stuff. My favorite album of his is Horse Soldier. That one is really cool album to listen to. But this one is his fourth album. This one is the first album that I confused the two. This is his fourth album, and the first one released in the United States. I don't know if you like country music before it became pop country. He's kind of like that, like Johnny Cash or those kind of guys, right? But with a Canadian tinge. All right, and then I found these two. So Prince basically has like 5 albums that you can listen to front to back and not have a problem with them, right? But if you want like an overall look of all of his stuff, this is probably the best thing that you can get within reason if you want it on CD, and that's the hits, number 1 and number 2. All right, so it's got like 36 of his songs on it, right? So the most interesting ones that I liked was the ones where other bands took his song, or other artists took the song and made it famous or whatever, but then you get to hear his version of it. So like Nothing Compares to You, remember that Sinead O'Connor song? He does a version of it on this. If I Was Your Girlfriend. Anyways, Prince is one of the big guys in the late 70s through the 80s. Probably his last great album was Sign of the Times, and after that he kind of went nuts. Like people that are praised over time kind of get an ego, and then that ego kind of goes wild, and then they go crazy when he like changed his name from Prince, and he's now the artist formerly known as Prince, and he turned himself into a symbol and all that stupidity, right? I mean, it was a bit foolish in the first place. If you've ever watched any of his videos or whatever, he's a very egotistical, central kind of guy, right? But you can't argue with his music, especially, like I said, from his beginnings up into Sign of the Times in the late 80s, early 90s, and then after that he kind of went over the deep end. All right, so those are the CDs. All right, let's do the movies, and then we should be done. All right. So I found this one, Life of Brian. Monty Python's Life of Brian. This film is really fun. Well, I think they made like 3 core movies, right? Monty Python was like a comic troupe that you can see on the BBC or whatever in England. But they kind of sprung out and they did 3 movies. There was this one, The Meaning of Life, which is my favorite, and what was the other one? The one with King Arthur in it. Anyways, I'll show it up here. Anyway, so this is Life of Brian. Basically, Brian is a guy that just so happened to be born at the same time as Jesus in the stable, like next to Jesus, right, or in the manger, I guess, next to Jesus, and his life kind of parallels Jesus's life, and to hilarious results. Let's put it that way. And Monty Python's just comedic genius, right? The troupe is just anyway. So I had this on DVD, but it's difficult to find on Blu-ray. So I found it on Blu-ray for $5. I was quite happy. The Whip in the Body, another one that I had on DVD. But I didn't have it in Blu-ray, so I picked it up. This is a Kino Lorber films. It's part of the Mario Bava collection. If you ever watch Mario Bava films, I don't know. This was a bit of a yawner for me, even though it starred Christopher Lee. Basically, about a count that likes to whip women, right? He's into the S&M or whatever, right? But it's pretty tame for today's standards or whatever. And I kind of watched maybe half of it, and then I kind of fast forwarded it the rest of the way to see if anything interesting happened. And other than being in a dark castle, but it's from the '60s, right? So, but I do have a bunch of Mario Bava stuff I haven't gone through. So, anyways, not my favorite film. Let's put it that way. This film, on the other hand, was quite fun to watch, and that is Love Me Tonight, basically with Maurice Chevalier. This is directed by Ruben Mamoulian. This is a Kino Lorber studio classic, and if you haven't watched this film is quite good. This is kind of like what would you call it? A poor man falls in love with a aristocratic woman, so there's a princess in this, and he's just a tailor. The princess and the tailor kind of meet in extraordinary circumstances and fall in love, but then the world crashes in on them, and Chevalier uses his voice, and there's a bit of music in this and singing, and it's quite a joyous film. It came out in 1932, a black and white film, and it puts a smile on your face. It's like a joyful film. If you need a film to lighten your heart or whatever, this is a really good film for that, right? All right, so then I found this one, another studio classic, and it's In the Heat of the Night. And if you have not watched this film, it's a Norman Jewison film, all right, and it's one of the greatest films of all time, especially if you're just looking at American cinema. Well, Norman Jewison is a Canadian, but this is basically an American film. It stars Sidney Poitier and what's his name? Who played the cop there? What was that guy's name? Rod Steiger. And Rod Steiger, basically about a crime that happens in the South, and a northern black detective is in the South, traveling through to go north, and he gets pulled into it to help the local, redneck sheriff's department try to figure out who did the murder, and you get, all that racism and black-white conflict in this film to a T. It's like like To Kill a Mockingbird. It has that right up on front. There's some really good films on, American racism. And To Kill a Mockingbird is one film. I showed you the book, but there was a film as well. And this is another one. This is extremely, extremely good film if you haven't watched it. All right. Then I watched this one, Infinite. Now, this one was panned, and I understand why. It's not an extremely good movie, but I like Antoine Fuqua's directing. I like his films in general. This one isn't one of his best ones. Mark Wahlberg stars in this one. It's about reincarnation, but I won't bore you with the details of it. And I got this one as a present, Bunyo. I don't know if you've ever seen this film, the Studio Ghibli films. Studio Ghibli is basically Japanese greatest anime filmmaking studio, and all of their films are like extremely good. So much so that Disney basically bought the distribution rights to them, or the rights to put them out in North America. And what happened is there was a whole group of them put out on Steelbook. And I have 8 or 9 of them on Steelbook, but I didn't have this Steelbook of Ponyo. So I have it on Blu-ray, like a regular Blu-ray or a regular DVD. But I'm collecting all the Blu-ray Steelbooks of the Studio Ghibli line, and I'm slowly getting them all. I have maybe 12 of them or something. Anyway, this is about basically a fish who wants to become a human. It's like, who directed it? I can't remember the guy's name. Anyways, it's basically The Little Mermaid. Japanese anime of The Little Mermaid, basically. All right, so Hayao Miyazaki, basically, him and the other gentleman, the two of them are basically the core of Studio Ghibli, and if one didn't direct the film, the other person did. But the greatest film in Studio Ghibli history is Grave of the Fireflies. I don't know if you've ever watched that, but you'll be a changed person after you watch that anime film, and I don't know if you'll be able to watch it for a second time, because I was really choked up with that film. Then one of my all-time, this is my favorite, I got it as a gift. It's my favorite Brian De Palma film, all right, which is basically a nice steelbook 4K of 4K Blu-ray of, do you recognize it? Of Body Double. All right, so there's the J card. A lot of people like to take the J card off, number one, and then put it on the shelf like this, and have all their steelbooks beside each other. But with the steelbooks, they'll scratch if you don't, take care of them properly. They think this is an extra to toss because it kind of, the reason why you buy a steelbook is usually because of the artwork, right? It's just a beautiful, piece of manufacturing, right? So if you put the J card on it, it's like kind of kill the point. It's like, no, just have art on it. And sometimes they don't have a J card. They'll just put the information that's on a J card onto the back of it, and people get upset with that as well, right? So all they want is just the beautiful art, right? So I can understand if you're not putting it on your shelf like this, and that's all you're going to see, and then you pull it out to watch it or whatever. But if you were to put it on a wall, like you would, let's say, like a like a photograph or a painting or an album cover, like I do, I put album covers up or CDs on the wall. Putting these up on the wall would be cool, right? Just put them, get some, get some shelving, or those J-shaped hook things that you put on the wall, and you just line up steel books on the wall and make an art design of it's really nice. I've seen some online that are really nice, but this is a beautiful 4K steelbook, and I got it as a present. So um, I got to protect it. Put it in a plastic case. I picked this one up myself. Usually I don't spend money on new items, just occasionally. Most of the new items that I get in my collection are from gifts, but I decided to splurge and get this one because this is one of my all-time favorite comedies, which isn't really a comedy, but it is kind of a comedy. I watched it in my 20s, and I've been looking for it forever, and the film, I mean, and Severin actually put it out. All right, and I'm not going to tell you how much I spent on this because I spent way too much money on it. But it's Blood for Dracula. When I watched it, it was called Andy Warhol's Dracula, but now it's like Andy Warhol presents Blood for Dracula, a film by Paul Morrissey. Now, Paul Morrissey's films are always a little bit interesting, let's put it that way. And this one is really, really good. I don't know if you've watched it, but if you haven't seen it, it's basically... Okay, spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you a bit about the film, all right? So, the reason why I find this film really good is because it tells us a story of Dracula that I've never, you have certain, you have certain things with that directors take a bit of license for. Like, there's general things, werewolves, if you shoot them with a silver bullet, that's how you kill them. A zombie, you got to shoot it in the head in order to kill it. You understand what I mean? But directors over time will manipulate those things, like maybe this vampire can see themselves in a mirror, or it changes just depending on who's writing and directing films or the TV shows, right? So same thing, let's say with Spider-Man, where some versions of Spider-Man, when he gets bit by the spider, he gets all the spider powers, but he also gets this thing that grows out of his wrist where he can shoot web from. And in other versions of Spider-Man, this is an attachment that he puts on, and he has this formula that he uses for it, right? So it just depends on which director of the movie and what they decide that they're going to do with it. Well, in this version of Dracula, it's almost all that. But the thing with this Dracula is that you can't just suck it. Like, I've seen movies where vampires can suck anything's blood. Sometimes they're restricted to only sucking humans' blood, but in other movies they can suck like animal blood or whatever, right? That kind of thing. But in this film, Dracula can only get nourishment from virgin blood. All right, so he needs to have women or girl virgins to suck blood from, right? So this is the funny part of the whole film, is that it's modern day now. It's not like old, back in the old days in Transylvania in the Middle Ages or whatever. It's modern times now, right? And he's in Romania or whatever, and he can't find a virgin, so he's got to travel to find virgins to suck blood from, because there's no virgins anymore. So it's like, the development of the pill and women's sexual revolution, right? So he's running out of victims. So it's like how women's promiscuity have killed off vampires. You know what I mean? It's like quite a hilarious concept. I don't know who thought of that idea, but it's kind of funny and it turns Dracula rather than a scary figure that you like, ooh, when you're watching films, right? It's like, ooh, scary Dracula. You feel kind of bad for the guy, right? It's like going around trying to get blood. You can't get blood because women are screwing everybody, right? So it's quite a funny concept. It's like, right in the 60s. It's definitely got that feel to it, right? So sorry about my voice. I'm getting over the flu. So that's Blood for Dracula. If you haven't seen it, now I spent an exorbitant amount on this. Now this has it in Blu-ray and in 4K UHD. And it was the third disc in it is the soundtrack for the movie, right? So you have all three things. Severin did a good job with that. So I'm going to watch this on the weekend with a friend of mine because I want him to watch it with me, tell me what he thinks of it, right? All right, so that's Blood for Dracula. All right, and last but not least, I said we're going to have an opening. So this I bought used, but the person never opened it. All right, so I thought maybe, and it's a recent, it's only come out in the last few years. This is basically the first 4 films of Hellraiser. I'm not sure if you're a fan of Hellraisers. There's so many horror fans in physical media collecting, right? Horror is probably the most popular of all the genres, right? So I found this, and I got this for a really good price. Now this thing is priced like $140 something at my local. Like, there's only one place that you can actually shop for physical media anymore in Canada. So mostly you're going to be buying stuff online, but if you do want to buy something retail, there is like one chain of stores that sells, they sell t-shirts, they sell, LPs, CDs, DVDs, Blu-rays, that kind of thing, right? And they have a section of boutique cinema as well. So I saw this there for like $149, if I remember correctly, $149 or something like that. Some ridiculous amount of money. And then I saw this on Facebook Marketplace, and the guy was selling it for like almost half that. So, and it's still new. So I picked it up from him, and I do it too. Like, it's like, if you ever question, like, let's say you're new and you're getting into collecting physical media, and you go buy things, and you go, why do people buy movies and then they sell them? Maybe they're getting out of the collecting or whatever, and maybe they moved on to something else, so they're selling their collection, and you go to buy their collection, and so many of their collection is new, like never been opened, and you go, well, why do they do that? If you're going to buy something, why aren't you watching it, right? You know what I mean? So why are you buying something, and for all the time that you've had it, you haven't opened it or watched it, right? So why have it in the first place, right? It's an interesting idea. Well, here's the reason for it is basically, if you come across a deal and you buy it, it doesn't mean you're going to watch it right away, right? Sometimes, you've been looking for something for such a long time, and you'll watch it right away, but other times you may already have it in your collection, and let's say this nice box set comes along, and you go, wow, I could improve my collection with this, because this is like a 4K, or I think it's a Blu-ray, actually. No, it is 4K. This is a 4K version of the 4 films, and I only have them on DVD or whatever, right? So you upgrade it, but then, you've watched them recently, and you're not really in the mood to watch them again, maybe for another 2-3 years or something, right? They may not be your all-time favorite films, but you do like watching them maybe in Halloween or something, you know what I mean? So, and then maybe something happens and you need to get some money, so you decide to sell some of your collection, right? Anyway, so I thought I'd open this with you guys, all right? So this is, like I said, it's the first 4 Hellraiser films. And let's see what we get. Now, I can't remember. I think there's 8 or 9 Hellraiser films by now, right? So it looks like the J card. It's a J card. It comes off, and then you have that nice. The chains on the back, and yeah, it looks pretty cool. And there's actually holes in this, so when you pull this out carefully, see those holes? All right. So what do we get here? All right, so got a nice box set with a pinhead on the front. This looks like, and you get a nice Ages of Desire hardcover book. All right, that's pretty cool. We got some nice artwork in it. Nice. So we got a nice booklet. Then I'm assuming you get the 4 films, right? Okay. So then you get that, and that kind of slides off, and it goes from being like flesh to bone, right? Okay, so then it opens up with the 4 discs. So it doesn't look like you get Blu-rays with it, just 4Ks. I don't know how far you go down into the Hellraiser catalog, let's put it that way, but 4 deep is fine with me. I mean, like even 3 deep would be okay with me. I was never really a huge fan of them, but it's nice, like when you have friends come over to watch movies or whatever, you have a nice selection of, maybe they're a horror fan, maybe they like Hellraiser and they'll watch it with you, or you get a hankering of watching a bunch of horror films on Halloween or whatever. So yeah, so that's not bad. I don't know if it's $150. The book is really nice though. So yeah, it's heavy, but now, people are just going to throw this out, right, and put this, if you don't protect your anything with paper, cardboard, you always want to protect on the shelf. So they're going to toss this or whatever, right? So, and then they're going to put it on naked like that, and then it's going to get all banged up and everything. So I always like to have the J card, and then I put it inside of a plastic bag, and it looks like it's original, right? So I'm not sure. Maybe somebody can tell me why you think Arrow put like these holes in the box, in the slip box. Is it so you can see inside the brain or something? Anyways. Alright, so that's pretty cool. So now I have the first 4 films of Hellraiser on 4K. Even though I don't have a 4K television, I do have a 4K player. I have a PlayStation 5 that also plays 4Ks, but I don't have a 4K TV yet. I just don't have the desire to buy one until, let's say, another one of my TVs conks out or isn't doing too well, right? So, all right, so that's everything for today. I hope you liked it. I hope you liked the unboxing of Hellraiser and the other things I've shown you. If you did, think about leaving me a thumbs up. Think about subscribing if you so choose. I would like it. And you have a great day. I'll see you in my next video. Bye for now.